Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Carl Goulet, and I am the gallery director here at 5pointsarts. I'll make this introduction quick so we can get into the conversation. But first off, I wanted to say it's been an absolute pleasure working alongside Ellen for this show. And it's been a pleasure to be able to see and live with these incredible photographs on a daily basis. For those of you who aren't aware, Ellen was the winner of our 2022 juried exhibition, which resulted in this exhibition. Photography Degree Zero, The Black Swans of Ellen Carey, will be up for just 2 more days. The gallery is open 1 to 5 both days, and we'll be holding a closing champagne reception on Saturday from 1 to 5. For more information on the current shows and our many other events and opportunities, including your chance to submit to our current juried exhibition, please visit our website, fivepointsarts.org. Tonight's talk will be recorded and available to view at a later date. If anyone has any questions throughout tonight's conversation, you're welcome to type them into the chat and/or Q&A boxes, which are located at the bottom of your screens. Moderating tonight's discussion is Dr. Rico Reyes. Rico is the Director of Galleries and Curator of Collections at Lafayette College, located in Easton, Pennsylvania. Rico also oversees the activities of the Williams Center Gallery, Grossman Gallery, Kirby Art Study Center, and the Art on Campus. Rico is an artist, curator, and cultural theorist whose 30-year experience has focused on expanding the conversations around art making and exhibitions to be more inclusive and equitable. I'll pass things over to Rico and we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to a few folks. I think first and foremost, we need to thank Douglas Highland, whose jurying and learned eye selected Ellen's work for this exhibition. And also thanks to Carl Goulet, our intrepid host tonight, and Judy McElhone, whose leadership at 5 Points continue to attract a high caliber of artists to show in Connecticut. And of course, thank you to Ellen Carey for continuing to make such spectacular work. So let me introduce Ellen, and then I have 3 questions, and I think they might be a little bit, since it's just the 2 of us, it will be a big, abstract, and kind of global questions, but I think we can hone it back into the work that's in the gallery right now. So here's my intro. Ellen Carey is an experimental artist who's working in photography since her days as a graduate student at SUNY Buffalo, receiving her MFA in 1978. She started using the 20 by 24 camera in 1983 at the invitation of Polaroid Corp, where she started her Neo Geo portraits, combining the aesthetics of op art, psychedelic art, and minimalist abstraction. She created dynamic self-portraits that pushed the notion of portraiture while embedded within the technological experimentation of the unique apparatus. Carey continues to use the 20 by 24 camera and extend the boundaries of what can be done with the camera and the peel-apart film as seen in her series Photography Degree Zero, which started in 1996. Her latest work in this series, The Crush and Pull with Rollback and Pen Lights, are currently on view in the 5 Points Gallery in downtown Torrington. So, hello, Ellen. How are you?
I'm great. Hi, great to see you, Rico. Thank everyone for coming tonight, and thank you, Carl and 5 Points and Judith, and for hosting this wonderful talk. So, thank you, Rico.
So, in a recent article that I just read about you, you recounted your experience with your Arts Foundation course as a frustrating endeavor that questioned your skills as a draftswoman. You realized you cannot draw and then look for other means of making images. This led you to your discovery of photography and its potential for art making. So my question is, why photography? Why now, and why continue with the medium?
Those are all 3 great questions. it's true. In Kansas City Art Institute, in my undergraduate, we had rotations through different departments, ceramics, painting, sculpture, glass blowing, weaving, etc. And it was printmaking. So it was when I got into the darkroom that it really, all the magic that people talk about with the darkroom appeared. And William Henry Fox Talbot, one of the inventors of photography in the 19th century, also could not draw or paint. So I felt a kinship there. I grew up, a Catholic. Obviously, there's lots of color in my work. I think that's an influence from the stained glass windows of my childhood. But I was always drawing as a child, or being creative, so to speak. My parents gave me a super shooter camera in high school, and Polaroid was obviously a huge invention, global, world famous. Why photography? Well, I love to experiment, and I think it's the process has always engaged my imagination. And I think my work is about discovery vis-a-vis, through my research, the Man Ray discovery of his hidden signature on the space writing, and also women in color, where I'm doing research around, science catches up to photography. And there's a new gene that was discovered called tetrachromacy, where women who test for this gene had 4 cones instead of 3, and the higher rate of color blindness is higher at 20 to 30% in men. So photography, I guess for me, it's just fascinating. I love going in the dark room. I love working with Polaroid. As I said, the whole process is very invigorating, and always challenging. I do work in sort of I have 4 kind of guidelines. Concept is very important to my work. And the word photography, actually PHOS, is Greek for light, and graphis for drawing. So it's light drawing with light. A prescient gift from my parents was the name Ellen, my Catholic birth name in Gaelic, Irish, and Celtic means light, or bringer of light. So I'm wondering if this DNA of destiny and fate sort of intermingles. Also, photography has a huge philosophical, the shadow image, outline, reflection. There's a lot of, being in nothingness, the existential dilemma. Photography Degree Zero references Roland Barthes' Writing Degree Zero, where the narrative arc doesn't have a beginning, middle, or end. It just is sort of without form. He was talking about the avant-garde in the Paris literature world, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and so forth. So I think it's also, for me, the challenge for all photographers is light's immateriality. We can't hold light, like you're not holding a paintbrush or a drawing, but we observe light through reflections, refractions, silhouette, outline, and I just love, it's all around us, and color is our universe and an artist's universe. If you look at the Impressionists, Monet, and we have our very own planet, and that's called photographic color theory: art, red, green, blue, yellow, magenta, cyan. So I think the whole thing, and working with chemistry, there's a lot behind the scenes, so to speak. And I think going into the color darkroom, or working with the crush and pulls, where the negatives, I'm crushing the negatives, which again is taboo. And it's invigorating because, and I guess I wasn't gender coded as a child. So of course the history of art and sculpture and painting excludes women. But when photography was invented, we have Talbot, then we have Anna Atkins, his contemporary, who did the cyanotypes. Sir John Herschel was the chemist and polymath who introduced the cyanotypes to Anna Atkins. And cyan means blue in Greek. So it's a team culture in many, many ways, which is great, even though the individual act of creation might be a singular action, so to speak. And I think I just love all the inventions, the innovations, and includes chemists and scientists. And, you have Isaac Newton's optics, in
Mhm.
1702. And then you have John Keats's response to that as, oh, unweaving the rainbow, like, oh, you told me what, the colors are. And, it's just fascinating. I mean, it's just fascinating. It keeps me engaged, so to speak. So,
Great,
so
thank you.
I did study painting and sculpture. I mean, I was a grad student at the Albright-Knox. I mean, I love it. I admire those artists. I just can't do it. That's all.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because and you mentioned faux and graphies as the light and drawing and photography, and the concept of photography coming out of drawing light or drawing with light, drawing with light. And I remember Talbot and early photographers really trying to create a machine that took made accurate drawings of nature, um, and so that the media, of so that the person sort of is kind of removed out of that equation, right? It's just nature and then the object that mimics her. But it leads to my next question, so why abstraction? Because abstract art, has been theorized by many art historians, critics, philosophers, and the textbook logic from the Enlightenment was that abstraction was a teleological exercise to move man towards the spirit, to disintegrate the physical form. But I think in that equation, sort of like really thinking about Deleuze and Guattari essay on minor language and how people who have been excluded from the conversation create their own language. And so I feel like I notice a break in this logic when it comes to women and abstraction. So I think that women artists who've been excluded from the conversation have created a new language. So I'm thinking that maybe women and abstraction is its own language. So my question to you is, why abstraction, and what does it narrate in your work?
Rico, that's an excellent question. I think when one looks at my work just as a kind of arc, we see Dada, surrealism, minimal abstraction, conceptual art. Size and scale is very important vis-a-vis, Robert Smithson said size could be a crack in the wall or the Grand Canyon. Photography, when it was invented, was such a powerful. We have Daguerre in Paris and Talbot and Anna Atkins in England. It really revolutionized. I just reread the story of Daguerre and Talbot, and it really revolutionized. There was travel photography, portrait, still life. It was very exciting. The exchange, and I think it highlights again that we're visual, we're we, we're globally linked visual through the visual. In photography, again, it's a conundrum. Abstraction in photography is a contradiction in terms, and I think minimalism is a further oxymoron. So it challenged me many ways, and of course, in my studies at Kansas City Art Institute, there's the Nelson Atkins Gallery across the street, and I took a lot of art history. And then when I went on to grad school at SUNY Buffalo, part of the avant-garde up there with Cindy Sherman and Robert Longo, Cindy and I had our first show together on a bus in Buffalo. And then there was Linda Cathcart at the Albright-Knox, and it was an empty field. So, but I am a recipient of all the beneficiaries of the post-World War II abstract expressionism. So when the avant-garde from Paris, Dada, and surrealism, and if we look at the parlor game of Exquisite Corpse, where one person would do a drawing and then they would fold it and pass it to another, and that would be passed along. So you would end up with this large triptych of individual drawings as a way to get into the creative subconscious, was their way of doing that. in a certain way, I think the darkroom affords one to enter, you physically enter another space. You're not in, the landscape or the still life, or you're not in a studio. You're in a physical space that's controlled either in black and white with amber light or in color darkroom with no light except exposure. So you're very sensitive to light. Even the word photography means light drawing, but you're sensitive to light. And as a recipient of post World War II, the art movements of abstract expressionism, minimalism, conceptual art, word art, and feminism in art history and that art movement, plus the political, social changes, culture, rock and roll and the Beatles and all that great. It was all poetry, Allen Ginsberg literature. So I think for me, I guess for me, when I start a project, it has to start with 4 C's. The first is concept. It has to include light or the absence of light or the half light. So this is what's so great that I think, and I think many will agree, many photographers will agree, it's really the light that begins the composition or the visual, and then content, what's in the picture. It could be self-portrait, it could be, abstract, it could be a palette, like the morning wall's all gray. I did a lot of research on Love and Loss, which also references Pliny the Elder, the myth one. It's also Oscar Raylander's The First Negative in the Musée d'Orsay. Content, what is in the picture, context, they can overlap, and citation, citation. So it could be, again, the morning wall was 15 feet high and 45 installation. So I can move around concepts. And I think, the abstract painters were incredible because they broke ground. Pollock took the canvas off the easel, put it on the floor. He used non-traditional art approaches and materials. It was an extension of his arm, so to speak. The free form, line is open form. The gestalt of the image, the sort of synoptic clarity. You can look at a Pollock up close and you can look at far away. And I think it's, discipline and dedication as well. So, and there's also something that's coming around in my field, note, is the materiality of the object. So Polaroid has it's a very distinct photo object. The color photographs have a luminosity and opacity and a brilliance all their own. The Polaroids, of course, come with the negative to positive peel apart process. And the negative begins with Talbot, William Henry Fox Talbot. I love this picture called A Cascade of Spruce Needles, which is echoed and mirrored in my show at the Fox Talbot Museum, called Light Struck. And the term light struck is, a photo term for light sensitive, getting into light sensitive materials. It also, Edwin Land was born in Connecticut, and he experimented. I mean, photography begins. I have a new book by Jeffrey Batchen up here, The Form of Nameless Things, where I think Talbot did over 3,000 experiments to get to this place. I mean, it is the artist struggle. Nobody likes to talk about that part. It's not so glamorous, or but we do struggle, and you're seeing the best of me in the 5-point show. So I think, and also there's a new book I think I mentioned to you before. This is from the Pompidou, the Women in Abstraction show.
Yes, so I will have to get a copy of that.
Yeah. So there are a few I know I was considered for this, but actually they had the cutoff age at 70 and over, so I wasn't quite, So Barbara Caston's in here. There's a lot of terrific, amazing female artists. So
great.
Whether it's our own language or not, I wouldn't know, I don't know how to answer that, but I think it offers us a lot of freedom from
Mm-hmm.
you know, the male gaze, if you will, or whatever the canon, the historical canon of inclusion. So, which is changing, but changing a little bit.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we're working to change it even more, right?
Yes, we are.
So my next question, it revolves around the title of your show, Photography Degree Zero, The Black Swans of Ellen Carey. So my favorite definition of the concept of black swan, is an element that disrupts systems.
Right.
So my question to you is, what is this element? What is the system that you are disrupting?
Oh, I think that's a great question. So the black swan is a disruption in the system. It could be we're going through climate change, the global pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
11. It could be breakthroughs in visual thinking, impressionism,
Mm-hmm.
surrealism. Um, uh, I think for the system that's being disrupted, we do have practitioners in cameraless photography as well as camera photography with abstraction, Molly Naj, Man Ray, Francis Berrier, Lee Miller, etc. I think with the Polaroid, this is what I'm doing is very unorthodox or not a traditional approach. I mean, the camera was, the 4080 camera for my Matrix show in 2004, 2005 was 4080, and then it was cut in half, and then 2024 and the 8x10. I think it disrupts the traditional frame, if you will, and the process is tantamount to the image or the non-image, and it leaves the viewer. The viewer is an active participant vis-a-vis. I'm not saying, okay, it's a blue flower. Not that I'm against blue flowers, of course. I love blue flowers, but I want the photo object to have its own, to speak back, if you will. And in this context, for example, I use the primary colors, RGB. I think in the announcement card with the crush and pull, there's the black, and then there's the that one right there. So this one speaks back. It's the photography degree zero, the black swans. The degree zero is zero exposure. Now, again, when photography was invented, there's a famous Daumier lithograph of Nadar over Paris, elevating photography to the art. Is it art? Is it science? There was a lot of discourse around it. And I remember it it was also going on, until just recently, actually, the last 40 years with Andy Grunberg's book, How Photography Became Contemporary Art, which just came out with Yale University Press. So this palette here has, red, green, and blue, and then, red, blue, and yellow. So the primary colors in painting are red, blue, and yellow. And then in photography, the additives are, RGB. So in a way, I'm talking back to that discourse, is photography art? Is it painting? Are you painting with light, et cetera, et cetera? And the black, of course, is very minimal, referencing, Frank Stella, or the color black, the dark room, if you will. And what's interesting about the crush and pulls are the positives are very smooth, and that kind of references Daguerre, the smooth palette, negative and positive, the mirror image, so to speak. And then there's the crack liqueur going through, what the French call crack, the sort of crackling going through. So, I think it's invigorating for me, to do that. So it's a discipline, it's a dedication, to. I'm also, I think it's, when I reflect on photography, when I look at Lee Miller, there's a big film coming out on her soon, and Man Ray's partner, lover, solarization. When I look at, read about Man Ray and Lee Miller's, between the wars, they didn't have enough heat, they didn't have enough food. I think about Edward Curtis up in, we're talking global climate. Well, he was up in the North Plain. I mean, when I look at incredible photographs, and I kind of imagine walking in the shoes of these photographers, these cameraless operators, or as we were once called before there was photography. And it's really kind of an extraordinary journey that they've all made. Muybridge in the animal locomotion, Ansel Adams, I mean, Moonrise over Hernandez's famous photograph. And then I, come in and ding, ding and shadow, zerogram, again, references, photogram, radiograms, etc. So, yeah, there we have RGB, yellow science.
Fantastic. So one last question. In reviewing the works in this exhibition, I've noticed a slight shift. And I'm sensing a little bit of a shift from minimalism to maximalism. So in your earlier works, you work with the Polaroid. When you work with the Polaroid, you had one negative, one positive. And now I'm seeing multiple negatives. I'm seeing multiple poles. And so how would you describe the shift from, from single negatives to multiple negatives? Is it to enrich the image, or is it to deepen the conversation, or both, or it could be something else?
Those are great questions. I consider the negatives their own artwork in the context of like the pull and roll back. That's from 2009. Every time there's a change in Polaroid, I respond. So this is using black and white pods. So the pods have the chemistry in them, and I'm mixing the pods. I'm borrowing phrases and nomenclature and lexicon, the language of photography. So in color photography, you can expose color film and then develop it in a different chemistry bath, and that's called color cross processing, and you get different colors. So I'm also, revisiting and creating new colors. The negatives, there's new books. Jeffrey Batchen just wrote a book on negative and positive, and there's another philosopher from Israel who wrote on the shadow. I think they're so incredible, and the physical. These negatives are one of a kind. They're not ones that you can put in larger and reproduce, and they have their own physical presence and autonomy, and they're very different from the positives. So I like showing them together with them. Again, it's I'm the only Polaroid artist that keeps the negatives, and as far as I know, I'm one of the few artists that have a discourse around the negative and the philosophy of that, vis-a-vis Plato's cave, the existential dilemma. And I think they're just kind of incredible objects. And the other thing that's really cool about them is they oxidize over time. So when I do the one-step peel away process, I leave them overnight. John Reuter, who I work with at, Polaroid for 40 years. So they dry, and then they can also respond to the air. And so the excess water evaporates and the chemicals oxidize. So they're sort of living objects in a way. So, and of course, Size and scale, I mean, Salle, Nancy Holt, I mean, those are all people dealing with massive, earthworks and so forth. So, um, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the crush and pulls with the rollbacks. Yep. And the negatives. And people want to know they're different objects. So they want to know, like, the negatives are light sensitive, and I have to take those into a totally dark room. And in COVID, in the pandemic, it was the little bathroom in my studio. So we were very inventive and resourceful to that extent. Yeah, so this is 4 panels, and then each panel, each Polaroid pull with a rollback, the red one has 2 negatives. So, yeah, so it was great to see it. I haven't seen it since I made it in 2021. So a lot of this work, because I make it and then it gets documented and packed away. So, so that was really great for me to take a look at it. So.
Great. So maybe we'll do a pause from my question.
Okay.
And open it up to the audience, because I know that there's a lot of folks who are interested in, the material and how you make it. So if there are any questions out there, please put it in the chat, or Carl is, I think, opening up the questions. Is there? Yeah, there's a Q&A button on the bottom. So please ask your questions.
You have any questions?
Are there any questions? Let me check. No questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
And nothing
I think, Rico, to extend your question is, people want to know, what is this a picture of, and how is this picture made? So what is this a picture of addresses, the content, context, and so forth, and how this picture is made, references the process of photography. So I think it's the combination of those two that maximizes, plus the scale. I mean, I think people are used to seeing photographs, even big, Gurskys and so forth. Those are digitally made, but I think when it's a physical, it's a physical in situ, it's a physical process. So
yeah. No, it was interesting. I was reading another article that talked about what are the markers of contemporary art, and it's always like it's abstract, it's big, it's messy, and it seems like you're hitting most of those points.
yes, I would say so. It's except when we're very clean. Photographers are very, so the color process. I mean, and I think also, there are different themes in art, of course, the still life. But when you look at, Van Gogh, you can see the beginning of abstraction, starting there with the way he uses the dots and the dashes to kind of bring up the volume, and, of course, Monet and Cubism and Surrealism and stuff. So I think going towards abstraction is, I say to people that don't understand abstraction, just make a little rectangle and hold it up to the sky, and there you have it. Little grid.
So, yeah. So we got 2 questions.
Okay.
First one from Anonymous.
Okay.
How much longer do you see yourself using this Polaroid process? If there is any thoughts on what could be beyond the material?
Well, Polaroid has its many challenges, and I think their story is. We can go on to. There's a airmail, which is written by Lloyd Grove. Airmail is the online platform, cultural online platform. That's Grayton Carter, who used to be the editor of Vanity Fair. So he did a big story recently, just came out on the Polaroid camera, the big 2024. I'll keep working as long as it's here. So that's what my commitment. Materials have meaning. When Polaroid in Black Monday, 1987, the artist support programs ended. I did a lot of materials tests. I did, at the time, there were people using Chrome, and I blew things up, and I do material tests. I do a lot of material tests. And materials have meaning, which of course is reflected in, in sculpture, like Donald Judd. He used the materials of his time, the anodized aluminum, which he patinaed in different colors. For example, I went to Marfa, Texas. I had no idea the range of the plexiglass color is orange and really beautiful violet, these plexi boxes. So I feel like Polaroid is part of the 20th century. Again, I'm referencing the 19th, 20th, and 21st century, the crush and pull, as making a new photo object. In effect, it's a Polaroid photograph. I've given a lot of thought to digital. I have done a series called Blinks digitally, where I've blown things up quite large, and they look great. It's a different object, though. It's a not light hitting, light sensitive material. It's ink hitting, paper. I've tried to do cyanotypes. I'm not very good at it. I do have a project in mind for it. There is a lot of discourse and research around the return to the materiality of the photo object. So I'm kind of in that cultural mix. And there's a lot of people doing research. There's a woman in University of Westminster, Sarah D'Amici, who's doing research on the darkroom as a performative space. So there's a lot. And with the new crush and pull with the hands that are, and the spruce needles at Fox Talbot, and then the New Britain, I'm doing some hand photograms, color photograms, but also the reference to the cave paintings they just discovered with the children. So touching is important in the work. So
great. Thank you, Ellen. Kathleen had a question. Who are your favorite modernist writers, since you seem tuned into the mutable nature of what we know or see?
Oh boy, I have a lot of books. COVID was great because I read a lot of books. Gee whiz. That's a tough question.
What kind of books do you read mostly? Fiction or?
I read both fiction, and I read about artists' lives. I read about Monet, called Claude and Camille. So I always loved Monet. But then through COVID, I got to really read it. I read Coco Chanel. Of course, I had on my previous, I had a library at home, and I had a whole shelf on Man Ray. I read about him. Simon Schuma, The Power of Art, Motherwell. I do research. I did research on Robert Motherwell at the foundation, where he did a lot of Polaroid SX70s towards the end of his life and painted on those SX70s. I'm rereading. I like I'm Being Blue by William Gass. I like philosophy. Artist lives. I don't know. I have a lot of books. I don't know if I have a favorite per se. I'm doing research on the hand in art and touching. So the Wadsworth Athenaeum had By Her Hand by Gentishili, Artemisia. And, I guess the phrase was, well, I'll show you what this hand can do,
Yeah. Artemisia Gentileschi is one of my favorite people. Favorite artists.
I'm doing research on Caspar David Friedrich. Looking, out towards the landscape with the back. There's a painting by Cailloubeau of a man standing at a window looking at Paris. Frederick Church, the Aurora Borealis painting. He was a Hartford resident. So
cool. All right. We can go on with the writing.
Yeah, I got lots of books here.
Here's another question. I think it was a little truncated, but the question is, how how you came to be in the process of work that opened up to making photography in a completely different way. So how did you come to this way of making photographs?
Well, you mean photography degree 0, I think.
Yeah.
Probably, correct.
Yeah.
Well, to give a precursor to that, in 1995, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness with 40 to 70 weeks to live. And my middle brother, John, was an AIDS doctor and had an accident and cracked a skull 6 months before my mother died. And then my mother died. So she lost her son and her sister. And then my mom died in April. So 1995 to 96. And then I went to the Polaroid studio to do a family portrait. This was first shown at Real Art Ways with the Morning Wall. It predates that. So in doing the family portrait, which of course photography is about, taking pictures of families and memory and snapshots, I did these were done in color, the 2 rectangles, the kind of signature Polaroid traditional rectangles, 2 black for my father died when I was 25. Again, 2 sudden deaths. And then my mother's was, about a year. And then 2 white for my older brother and myself, and my middle brother, John, was black, and then the 2 whites at the end. And they look like, it was interesting because people compare my work to minimal and abstract art, but it reminded me of my grandparents had a baby grand piano, the onyx keys and the ivory keys. But when the negatives were peeled apart, whether they were positives, whether they were black or white, were all the same. So I realized existentially that we're living and dying at the same time, even though we know that intellectually. Here was the physical embodiment of it. And it also looked like open burial pits. And they also looked like Liz, I used to be a printmaker at Kansas City. I majored in lithography and art history and photography, but they reminded me of inked up
Stones.
Stones. Yes, of course. So then when it was August 1996, I had buried my brother, my mother, and my aunt. Then we went to pull it down, John Ruder, and there was a little kind of irregular shape. And then I said, okay, what's that? He said, I don't know. So let's just do it again. And we did this other one, and there was the white rectangle with the parabola, which is the conical loop. And then another all black one. So that was photography degree 0, referencing Roland Barthes' writing degree 0. When I was first in New York City, I was a picture researcher at Mademoiselle magazine. And so I was used to doing research on images. They would give you a story and you had to find the pictures. But I lived for 6 months in New Mexico in Las Cruces near New Mexico State University. And one, faculty gathering, I met the astrologer who discovered Pluto. And we were talking about, what did you do, art, photography, etc. And he said, Ellen, science and Einstein said science and art are branches of the same tree, and you like to do research, so you need to look at fractal geometry and the logarithmic spiral. So I began all this research on geometric forms, and the whole world just opened up in that context. And that was self figures with spirals and so forth. So when I had that epiphany, that moment, the je ne sais quoi, or the synchronicity, where there's, that illusion between living and dying. And I've read, Eric Fromm's book, Escape from Freedom and Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. So I went back to Hartford, and that's because I lived in New York and Hartford, going back and forth. And I gave away all my cameras because photography is about describing the external the world. John Zarkowski's essay Mirrors and Windows, which I think is fabulous. I love reading it. I've read it many times. But here I was in this sort of metaphysical state, this morning state, and I couldn't describe my feelings with a camera, and there it was, the photography degree 0. So
Oh, fantastic. Sad beginnings, but very
well, it's
yeah.
it was a breakthrough. It was the
Yeah.
book of living and dying I read, and anyway.
We have another question.
Mm-hmm.
How has it been to be an artist who makes an orthodox tradition, transforming works that disrupt and brings works simultaneously with light bringer? And by the way, the work is beautiful, powerful, mind altering. Thank you.
How does it feel? Well, I think photographers are often called light travelers. So I'm thinking of um, Martin Buber, the philosopher, who's
Mhm.
the German Jewish philosopher. And he says, all journeys have a secret destination of which the traveler is unaware. And I think that has been my philosophy, and looking at Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which, traces a
Mhm.
lot of movies use that, like Harry Potter and so forth.
Mhm.
So I'm a light traveler, just follow the light, see where it
Speak,
goes.
speaking of traveling, you have mentioned several upcoming exhibitions. Do you want to share some of those?
Well, there is one called Light Struck at the Fox Talbot Museum in Laycock, England, which is the home of William Henry Fox Talbot. And
Mhm.
that opened in May. And that's going to be up till March 2024. And there will be a part 2. I'm not sure exactly what it might be around my research on women in color, Anna Atkins, color photography, and those struck by light. Which it really, I curated a show in New York City and then one in Paris, but I'd really love to do that in England. And the New Britain Museum of Art complements that show called Struck by Light, which is the name of my photogram practice. And that show opened, that exhibition. So part 1 was June, and then part 2 is July, and that goes through January of 2024. And we'll also be doing a Zoom on November 5th, I believe. And then we have the 5 Points here at Torrington, and I'm going to be doing something with the group at Doncaster and the community there at Doncaster in September or October. So I'm
And then
busy.
Perry Photo, right?
Oh, Perry, yeah. There's actually before Perry Photo, um, September 7th, 8th, 9th, that weekend at the Jacob Javits Center.
The
My
Armory Show.
Jane Baum is doing a
Okay.
booth. And the Jacob Javits Center is hosting the Armory Show,
Mm-hmm.
the photography fair. So it's a brand new venue, umbrella, very big. And I'm doing a big installation that I showed at the Harvard Art School faculty show, Crush and Pulls with the Rollbacks. And there'll be a big installation of 6 panels across. So
nice.
and there's some books coming out. There's a group show at the Bibliothèque Nationale in France called The Materiality of the Photograph. I'm not sure what the French term is, but the Zerogram is on the cover, and there are going to be 4 of those. And then their show, things seem to be, returning to abstraction and light and color seem to be on a lot of people's minds these days. A lot of curators and institutions.
Do we have any other questions out there? Oh, one popped in.
Yep.
How does teaching inform your work?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it keeps, students are terrific. They're very inquisitive. It keeps me, if I was a tennis coach and a champion tennis player, I think it would keep me, in shape, so to speak. It keeps me up in my field. Our field has changed radically in the last 40 years, of course. And then with COVID, the pandemic, there's a lot of open calls, etc. So I think my students are terrific. A lot of them are quite talented. I see their struggles, so I support them. We talk about those struggles. It's a discipline. I think it keeps me, Sandy Scovel and I talk about this quite a bit. It keeps us present, fully up to date, kind of present. So, and updated. I mean, there's College Art Association, there's Society for Photographic Education, and they come to me and they tell me everything, and they want to know how. A lot of them are really funny because they want to know how the dings and shadows are made. And I say, well, you go make one and I'll give you one. And it's funny to see them, trying to make my work. And they go, wow, that's really hard. Like one student asked me, how many hours did you do in the color darkroom? I'm like, well, I don't know. Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 40,000 hours to just start to get good at something. So I think we got up to that. But, I think it's intergenerational as well. John Copeland's was a great friend of mine, the great photographer. And we used to talk about art all the time. Ben Lifson, Saul LeWitt, it's great to talk to people about art and have that context. So, I think that's what it does. And I love the dark room. So, and digital and lighting. We have a great facility at the Harvard Art School. So,
yeah. So if you definitely want to use the dark room, the Harvard Art School has a great dark room, and hopefully 5 Points is photography studios will be up and running soon.
Well, they have a great digital printing. The Peter Ball's digital. Whoa, amazing.
So there was a little thank you for us. So maybe like one more minute. Any parting words about, I don't know, inspirational last thoughts for our young artists out there?
I would say for young artists, I guess the challenge, well, you're going to go through these struggles, and that's okay. That's okay. The end of the day, have a good cry and go out for a pizza and a movie. It's okay. Try to keep in shape. Take care of yourself. I would say self-care is really important. I was an athlete as a younger person, and I used to run on the West Side Highway. I think it's great to have great sleep. Read whenever, go to as many museums as possible. Keep yourself open. Try to travel. Go to Paris. Go to London. Go to great museums. The Wadsworth's great. New Britain's great. 5 Points great. Talk to other artists. You're going to have lots of mentors in your life, and people are going to come and go. But I think just keep it as a discipline. You brush your teeth every day, and you get up and keep going. And I think for students, your question earlier, like I understand what they're doing, and so a lot of times people don't understand what a young artist is doing. So Linda Cathcart was a great mentor for me. I had great mentors in Kansas City. Bill McKim was my printmaking teacher, and he was taught by Thomas Hart Benton. So I read Thomas Hart Benton, and Jackson Pollock. Women artists, of course, and don't be afraid to try something, take risks. I mean, it's okay to fail. It's absolutely fine. So, and I think you really have to think about this is the pinnacle of our humanity here, like great art, like what makes Jackson Pollock a great painter, or Van Gogh, or Linda Benglis, or Nancy Graves, or what makes those artists great, and then analyze why they're great, and then just keep your wits about you. That's all. And have a sense of humor. I'm very funny, Rico, right?
Yes, you are.
Most people don't know that. It's sort of my mother told me that. I was the funniest of all her children and the most creative. And
yes.
So ask your mother and father. They'll tell you.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. Carl, back to you.
Thank you, Carl.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We had a great time. I know I did. So as I said before, Ellen's show is open for just 2 more days. And we will be holding a closing champagne reception on Saturday from 1 to 5, and I hope to see you there. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Okay.